Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first alumni live stream of the year. Today, we're going to be talking with Raj. We're going to dive a little deeper into his experience with studying and living in Sweden and what opportunities this has presented him with. At the end of the session, we're going to open up for a live Q&A. So if you have any questions to Raj, please write them down and type them in the chat when we start the Q&A session. But without further ado, let's bring in Raj. Hey Raj,
Hello,
welcome.
Hi, Frederick. Thank you very much.
I'm really happy that you could be with us today and talk about your experience. Can you start off by just introducing yourself and where did you study in Sweden?
For sure. Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I'm really grateful towards Sweden and Swedish Institute, for that matter, for giving me a scholarship and bringing me to Sweden. I studied in Lund University in Sweden. I studied welfare policies and management, an MSc, and I was given a scholarship, the Swedish Institute scholarship for my master's period. After that, I went to Nepal. I worked for a year, and then I went back for another master's in the London School of Economics. I did MSc in local economic development. And after that, I started working for the World Bank in Nepal for a few months. And 3 weeks ago, actually, I switched from my job in the World Bank to currently I'm working for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development based in France. And although the job is remote, I'm in London right now, but I'm working for the OECD. Currently, I'm looking at two different projects at the OECD. First of all, I'm looking at the project called Supporting Subnational Reconstruction and Recovery in Ukraine. And the second project is building more resilient cross-border regions in 5 different cross-border regions in Europe. So this is what I've been doing. This is what I studied in Sweden and how I ended up in Sweden.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Can you tell us a little bit more what you did prior to moving to Sweden and studying in Sweden?
Yeah. So before coming to Sweden, I was chairing the national debating organization of Nepal called Debate Network Nepal. We did a lot of parliamentary style debates. It's also a competitive sport, but in Nepal we were also using it to promote democracy. So we're working a lot with schools, with universities, with politicians, teaching them how to form arguments, how to form logic, how to debate in a public forum, and also to general public, just to make sure that they're able to voice their narratives, just to make sure that they can talk to politicians. So we're doing a lot of work around democracy and governance. And I have been myself a debater I had been a debater for the last 6-7 years before I became the chairperson for this organization. And during my leadership and throughout the whole 6 to 7 years of journey, I probably reached out to, I don't know, over 3,000 individuals and teaching them how to debate. So after that, a quick jump to MSc in welfare policies and management was quite natural for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a great experience to have before, and then just building it on with a master's degree and so forth. But let's talk a little bit about your move to Sweden. So moving to a new country always comes with surprises. What were some of the most unexpected aspects of Swedish culture that you encountered when you first arrived? Does anything in particular come to mind?
I moved in the September of 2019. So it was end of summer, early autumn. And Sweden was the first country I ever moved out to. Like, this is the first country other than my home country I lived in. So obviously there were a lot of cultural shocks. I come from the southern hemisphere, and not the southern hemisphere, we're closer to the equator lines. And when I moved to Sweden, it was quite far up north. And obviously the weather and the sunlight and the snow in the winter was quite different. I knew it would happen. I'd read about it, but it's one thing to read about it, but it's a different thing to experience it. And then we were crazy enough to climb all the way up to Kiruna during the winter and chase the northern lights. And during the summer, I went to climb the Kebnekaise, largest peak of Sweden. So we did quite a lot,
Impressive.
and to see like 12 hours of darkness and also 12 hours of light in far that up north was really crazy. But I could tell that, but in my very first month, there were a lot of things that I was very impressed with, like the infrastructure and development of Sweden. Everything was digital, payments were digital, banks were digital, the national ID. I think there was only one thing, the tax registration, that wanted me to go to their office, but everything else which was associated with my move to Sweden, everything was digital. I was very fascinated with it coming from a country which is not so digital. The other cultural, I will tell you a funny cultural shock. I was
Yeah.
very mesmerized with the fact that buses and all public transports in Sweden had heating systems. So back in our homes, the temperature is not so high up and low down. It's quite moderate, and we don't have such good heating systems. So when winter came and I was sitting in a bus and I felt the heat coming in, I was like so surprised. But I became very used to it. I became very used to the comfort. But yeah, these were some of the cultural shocks that I faced when I came to Sweden.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like you covered a lot on your time here. I mean, climbing Kebnekaise, that's a great feat. I haven't done that. I know many Swedes would like to do that and have that like as a goal. But yeah, that's cool. And you saw the Northern Lights as well. I mean, yeah,
Yes.
definitely
I
made the
think
most of it.
I think at least three things contributed to that. The first was the pandemic. The rest
Mm.
of the world was completely shut, and I was there during 2019 to 2021. Sweden was comparatively quite liberal when it came to lockdowns. So, and we had a very close group of five friends who wanted to do everything. So we took a car. We were quite isolated, but we were together among ourselves. And then because mobility was okay in Sweden, we went almost we did the north south to north trip at least twice. So that was
Wow.
really good. I took a lot of chances. And the third thing was, I mean, you have to be a little bit crazy by yourself to do all of that. So I think everything just came together, and I got to experience the best of Sweden.
Yeah, that's awesome. So so during your time in Sweden, was it you did 2 degrees? You said.
No, I did one in Sweden, and then 2 years later I went to London to do my second degree. So there were two different
All
degrees.
right. So was it 1 year in Sweden or 2 years?
2 years, two
Two
full
years
years
in
in Sweden.
Sweden.
Yes.
Yeah. So during these 2 years, who were some of like the key people who inspired you? Can you share how they influenced your path? Is there someone that sticks out?
Um, I am an academic, so I think I can tell you an academician that I met in Sweden who taught me how to look at the world entirely differently. I
Hmm.
had this professor called Max Koch, and he was a German, but he was teaching in Lund University for a really long time. I think he was a resident and probably a citizen of Sweden too. But he taught the class an entirely different view of the world. When the world is all about growth and fast pace and how to achieve things and how to achieve things quickly, he taught us about two different unique components that we need to be really mindful about. And I think this is also something that reflects Sweden. First is to look at anything and everything with a lens of gender, and second is to look at anything and everything with a lens of environment. So he was doing a lot of work before, but then he had completely shifted his work to look at gender and environment, mostly environment. And these are the two things that I think really went parallel with the values of Sweden, because my scholarship was in sustainable development goals. I was working on sustainable development goals, and so everything was thinking so well. And his thoughts, his lectures, and his seminars really stood out for me. So I think after that, I was always thinking about development. Before that, I was always thinking about development as growth, as taking a country or a region from point A to point B. But then after his class, I really started to think about also the social and environmental components of development. So I think that really changed my life. So from that to every other company that I've worked into, I think I've always taken the gender and environmental lens first and then the development. So whenever someone is pitching me
Mm.
something, I always think about what is it doing to gender, what is it doing to environment. That's one. And I think more generally, I could also tell you that I had a very nice time with my scholarship network. um, Lund was a big university, and we had two different boards of Swedish Institute leadership, like scholarship boards, because it was big university with at least more than 100 scholars. So we had two different boards who would organize activities to engage everyone, and I got to lead one of the boards as the chairperson. So I had the opportunity to network with every single international student that was a part of the scholarship team, and the board itself were so close. Even until today, we're texting each other on, like, someone is celebrating Eid, and even though I'm not a Muslim, I write Eid Mubarak to my Muslim friends, and they do the same for my festivals. And it's such a nice community that we've built through Swedish Institute Scholarship. And I think this is a network that I'll always cherish throughout my life.
Yeah, networking is so important in your professional life, and we're definitely gonna talk a lot more about networking a little bit later today. But let's continue on with like the Swedish culture a little bit, because before the live stream, you told me that you were quite impressed by the Swedish welfare system and like community initiatives such as Fritidsbanken. Could you explain what Fritidsbanken is and what about it stood out to you?
I can tell you so much about Fritidsbanken.
Yeah,
No, not
please.
no, not really. But I learned about Fritidsbanken quite late, I must say. I spent 2 years in Sweden, and I only got introduced to Fritidsbanken in my second year, which was tragic because I wished I knew about it sooner. So Fritidsbanken is a concept. It's like a library for sports equipments. So just like in library where you can borrow books and you return them so that someone else can use them. In Fritidsbanken, they have a lot of sports equipments that you can borrow for a week or 2 weeks, and you can practice the sports. You can play it over the weekend. You can take it for the summer if you request them, and then you can just bring it back. And it's not just sports equipment. It's also camping gears, and you can borrow tents. You can borrow hiking boots. You can borrow sleeping bags. You can borrow absolutely so many things. And it is through Fritidsbanken that I learned how to play badminton. I was never able to do roller skates in my life, but I learned roller skates because of Fritidsbanken. I would otherwise never invest any amount of money in buying a rollerblade. That is something I would never do, right? But because that was accessible and that was free for everybody, I could just go and say, okay, maybe I would want to try roller skates, and then I just borrowed them and I just went on a safe space, and then I tried it, and in 2 weeks, like, you really could learn something. And that was such a good news for me, but also the whole system of promoting residents to go outdoors, to play sports, to be active physically and mentally. It's such a nice concept, and I think this concept is shared in so many other Swedish values as well. You started this question with the welfare system, and I studied welfare policies in Sweden, so I know a little bit about it. I think Sweden in general is a country that believes in mutual ownership and doing things together and sharing things a lot. And that was very evident in many different aspects of life. Life was very easy in Sweden, and it is because of this communal aspect. Like, everybody spoke English. Like, most of the people, especially if you're going to a university town, almost everybody speaks English, and that was the best because I didn't have to learn a new language. I wish I did, but I didn't have to learn a new language, and that was really nice. But yeah, there's Fritidsbanken and Eric Schalpen is another place that I worked in. Eric Schalpen, do you want me to tell you about it now,
Yeah,
or we can talk about it? Yeah,
yeah,
Eric Schalpen.
yeah,
So
sure. That
I actually, yeah, so Eric Schalpen is a secondhand store. I think it's a secondhand store, and the profit goes towards helping kids in needs in different developing countries. So I love the idea of Eric Schalpen, and I had the opportunity to volunteer for them towards the last 3 or 4 months as well. And I was very surprised with the volume of goods that Swedish people gave away for reuse. I've never seen, first of all, I've never worked in a secondhand stores before, but then even then, it was very hard to comprehend. Like, there were so many goods coming in that people just wanted to recycle, and there were so many people coming in to buy recycled goods as well. So I
yeah.
think it was a really good ecosystem and I really loved it. And the people who were running the shelters, only very few of them were employed. Most of them were volunteers, like me and so many other people. They were volunteers. They genuinely wanted to contribute with their time to make sure that this ecosystem is running. And I think this is another example of the not formal welfare, but an informal welfare system in Sweden. That was really nice. I think that has allowed Sweden to have a lot of trust between the people and the government. Because I can tell you a story. The first day I walked into Eric Schalpen, I'm a volunteer. They don't know me very well. I don't know them very well. And the first task that I get as a volunteer is to put price tags on goods that were supposed to be recycled. And I was like, I don't know. I don't trust myself as much as you're trusting me right now. So I there was a lot of trust, and 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 you don't trust yourself that much, but to get that much trust from someone else, from an institution, that felt really good. And these are the things that stand out, like 4 years after I've left Sweden, that's still a thing in my memory. So there's so many things that I could appreciate about Sweden.
Yeah, and I guess that trust also it works, because then you can ask your colleagues, you can ask your supervisor, like, how should I do this? I mean, you can always ask, and yeah, that's great. And just to go back just 1 second to Fritidsbanken, I mean, that is a thing you cannot miss if you come here to study. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a good opportunity to just take some time to learn a new skill. Like, yeah, you might not want to spend a lot of money buying roller skates, but you're curious to try. You can just, yeah, learn
Yeah.
them, and
Yeah.
then And if you don't
Yeah.
like it, I mean, yeah, you don't have to buy them. It's such a great thing, and you can do it
Yeah.
with friends. And yeah, I know lots of people lend the ice skates when
Yeah.
the lakes go icy, and you can take them out on the
Yeah.
ice. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super
It
cool.
was so good. And the only thing that they need is your phone number. And
Yeah.
that's the amount of trust that they have on people who borrow things from you. It's really surprising.
Yeah, but it just works. And
Yeah.
the secondhand market is also, I mean, it's super big in Sweden. I know, I live in Stockholm, and
Mhm.
Stockholm, the capital city of Sweden, of course. And I mean, everyone is buying secondhand goods. There's a lot of stores like Erikshjälpen, which are secondhand markets where the profits go to helping organizations. But there's always, I mean, there's all various kinds of niche secondhand markets as well.
Yeah.
And I as well, I mean, it's so convenient. Oftentimes, if you have like a big, if you're moving in Sweden and you have some big furniture which you can't just transport, and you want to get rid of it, Erikshjälpen might be able to come to your apartment
Yeah.
and pick it up for you. And this
Yeah.
is just like, it's a great ecosystem of just reusing and recycling furniture, because it's such a waste to just go and throw away a perfectly good furniture that someone else could use.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I really like it.
Mhm.
You talked a little bit about Erikshjälpen. I'm just a little bit curious. What, like, how did it come to be? Why did you start
Um,
volunteering?
um, during my last semester, I was only doing my thesis, so all the coursework was over, and I was already writing my dissertation, and I had a lot of time in my hands. And the last semester was also spring to summer, so outdoorsy was okay. And I had a friend who was volunteering there, so I asked him if I could join, and he said, "Sure, let's go and ask." And then we asked, and that day was the day I started working, and I started putting price tags on the goods. So it was, yeah, that's a really funny story. And then I went there, and it was a nice community, and I just liked going there. And I went there until I think a week before I left Sweden. So I just kept on going.
That's cool. That's nice. You also worked at the admissions office at Lund University. Is this right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
So can
I
you
did.
tell me a little bit about your experience working there? Like, What is there anything that stood out to you? What did you learn from working?
Yes. So I was working. First of all, I started as a ambassador to Lund University for international students. So I would facilitate conversations with people who wanted to join in Lund University. If it's either if they're from my country or they're interested in my program, they would be matched with me, and I would talk to them, and I would tell them about the university. I would tell them about the course, and so on and so forth. And that was during my first year. And during my second year, the program was also kickstarting that year. So in the second year, they realized that this was doing really good. There were a lot of students that came and talked to us. So they wanted to expand it and formalize it a little bit. And so the university needed some help. So they recruited 2 students, out of which one of them was me. And I joined formally the Lund University's international office, I think it was called. And from there, we expanded the team. We were 22 ambassadors first, and then we expanded to over 90 ambassadors. So I was formally responsible for marketing that component to existing students, recruiting them, saying, if you want to be an ambassador, please come and join us. And then training them. I was responsible to train them to how to respond to requests and how the platform works and everything. So my job was marketing, recruitment, and training, and to just maintain the social calendars, make sure that all of the ambassadors are engaged with some socials, career development, or just fun sessions, networking, potluck. I used to organize all of that. I think one of the biggest benefits from doing that was, like you said, network. There were all the Swedish Institute scholarship holders plus other international students who were the ambassadors of Lund University. They were very close proximity with me. So I think that really gave me an opportunity to learn so much about many people, their cultures, their different countries. We had, I think, over 50 countries represented within that pool. So I really made really international friends. Lund University is, I think, the most international university in Sweden. It was really good community of people. So that was a really good experience. I'm still in connection with a lot of friends that I met there. And whenever I'm traveling abroad for work, anything, I just give them a call, and they come to meet me, and I go to meet them sometimes, and we have a beautiful dinner. So I think it's this small extra effort that you do during your time as a student, sometimes going to Fritzbanken, sometimes going to Erkschalpen, being in the admissions committee, anything that makes you active and allows you to network with people, I think will create enough memories for you to think about those times and cherish those moments. So it was a really good experience.
Yeah, and like doing you're taking your masters abroad is such a big opportunity for cultural exchange and networking opportunities, because you're surrounded, like you said, with
Yeah.
a lot of people that are doing the same thing from all over the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's fantastic. Now you have a network that is global.
Yeah.
So in about networking, let's dive a little deeper, because as I understand it, after your studies in Sweden, you moved back to Nepal and you started the Sweden Alumni Network in Nepal.
Yes.
This is no small feat. What was it that inspired you to do this? And talk a little bit about how did this come to be?
Yeah. Well, as you might have guessed by now, I'm very proactive, and if I see something that I could do, I really want to do it. So this was in 2019 when I went. I was a Swedish Institute scholar, so we were all invited to Stockholm for this 2 days conference, or was it one day? I'm not sure now. But then somewhere during the day, one of the facilitators said that there are alumni networks all over the world. And then I did not know of that network. And then I checked. Then I found out that Nepal was a small country, so is a small country. So there was no alumni network. So I immediately thought to myself, the moment I graduate, I'm going to go and establish an alumni network. So this was 2019. And 2021, I do graduate, I go back home. And there were, I think, 1 or 2 other scholars from the same year that went back home with me. And I also reached out to a few other scholars that were alumni and then that wanted to do something. And I think the minimum requirement at that time to form a board was 7 ambassadors, 7 people who would be on the board, and maybe a community of a few other people. So we started with that. We started with the bare minimum. We started with 7 people, I think, in the first time, saying, "Okay, let's make a board. Let's look at the provisions. Let's look at this, and then let's do it." And then we worked really hard, and this was all voluntary, so it took a lot of time and energy to just communicate with people and ask for their time to be in the board, to do the communications, to do the materials, to do the proposals. But honestly, it was not that difficult, because everyone was really excited about this network, because they just wanted someone to lead it. But if there was a network, they said that there would be active participants. So I thought to myself, well, we should do it, we must do it. And then we started it in 2021. And then eventually we grew up, and we grew up very rapidly. I could only lead the network for 1 year, because then I moved abroad for work. But there were other volunteers, like, who stood up for the chairperson, and she led it so well, so perfectly. I think up until today, we have over 50, 60 alumni connected through that network, which started with 7 just 3 years ago.
Wow.
And I think the biggest news is that in 2023, the Sweden Alumni Network of Nepal was, out of, I don't know, 50, 60 universities, it was awarded as the best alumni network in the year
Wow.
2023. That was really, really good. That was
That's so cool.
fulfilling. Yeah. So yeah, I was not leading the board then, but I was just so happy to learn that it was doing really, really good. And I think from that network, um, just like I said before, like, if you do anything small thing to network with other people, you will have a lot of resources that network to communicate with people. From that event, from that loose institution, we were able to be in very close relationship with the Swedish consulate that stays in Nepal, also the Swedish embassy that is in Delhi. We had the ambassador of Sweden visit us in Nepal once. We had a small ceremony, and then I think the ambassador retired in a few time, and then we also hosted a goodbye or farewell dinner to the ambassador at some point. We had a lot of people coming in. And because we were an institution, we were no longer just graduates of Sweden, we were an institution of students who graduate from Sweden, that gave us some sort of institutional organizational vibe. So using which we could reach out to people saying, "Hey, we are Swedish Institute Alumni Institution. Would you be able to come and take a session with us?" So using that some sort of authority, we invited a lot of speakers to our events, and we talked about many, many sustainable development goals. And I think this is what led us to also win the Best Alumni Network Award. But the point being that the alumni network was very, very instrumental in connecting us with so many resources that existed within our country, but we didn't know about them. So yeah, it was a really good network that we built.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna ask you about like um, um, what part of studying in Sweden has shaped your professional outlook and opportunities, but it seems like, I mean, the central thing here is network, right?
Yes.
It's all
Yeah.
about the cultural exchange, and you're starting the alumni network in Nepal led you to also expand your network. But if we can look outside of that, maybe, like, how has your time in Sweden shaped your professional outlook and opportunities outside of the network capabilities, then, let's say?
Mm, I would say Sweden is one of the most progressive countries in the world. It's a small state considering the population, but it has been a thought leader in the world in so many things, notably social indicators and environmental indicators. So, being in Sweden in that environment for 2 years um, has compelled me to think differently about the world. This is something that I started with as well. I came from Nepal, and I didn't have so many institutions around me. I didn't have so many. I didn't feel the presence of government or state as much as I did when I was in Sweden. In Sweden, state is quite big, and it's not a bad state. It's a very good state that really wants to help you. So in Sweden, I learned what a state is and how friendly or how enabling can states be. For example, like, it was very surprising to learn that education is fully free until any point of your life in Sweden, and the state even pays you a little bit so that you can sustain yourself during your studies. It was a completely new concept for me, and this is very different to other countries like US or London, the UK. No matter how, they're also very developed, but education is not free. In Sweden, education is free, and so is healthcare, and so are sports equipments for that matter. So really different understanding of state is something that was a massive takeaway for me from Sweden. And that's more formal institution. Towards informal institution, I think trust base of the society, like Eric Shelpin asking me to put price tags on the first day was a big amount of trust that they put into me. They didn't even know me in the first day. My friend said in his first day, someone wanted to drive the Eric Shelpin truck from point A to point B. And no one knew that friend, but they just handed him the keys and asked him if he could move the truck. And it was a massive amount of trust that someone puts if they ask you to drive the truck of the company in the first day. So this trust base is quite different. In academics, I think is also extremely different. I came from a culture where studying meant reading and being taught in class more. I think we were we were given so much content in class to a point that reading was not as encouraged as teaching. Sweden was completely different. Sweden was, let's say, 2 to 4 hours of teaching, but the whole week you do your own reading, you study by yourself. And I still remember the first thing that we were told at our university is to not call our professors sir or ma'am, just call them by their first name. This tells us so many different things. This tells us that Sweden does not really believe in power or hierarchy among colleagues. Like everyone goes by their first name, no sir or nothing. And one of the professors even said, at a level of master's degree, you guys are not our students, you guys are our colleagues. So we're not responsible to just teach you, but we're responsible to think with you. So you and this is your responsibility too. You need to think with us. So this kind of thought leadership is something that you do not get in many different countries in the world. And I think that was really, really different, unique about Sweden. And I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, that has been really good. Like so many different powerful things that has completely shaped me. I also, like in an extremely personal level, I was also obese before I came to Sweden. And then I lost 23 kilos in a year in Sweden. So I think
Congratulations.
fitness is also, thank you very much. Fitness is also a huge thing. I come from Nepal, South Asia, which is the home of yoga, but I never did yoga in my life when I was in Nepal. In Sweden, I did so much yoga. I could do headstands and so many different asanas. So in a fitness level, it was really good.
Cool. I think that is a really, really good description. And I think that's awesome that you had all these great experience. That makes me proud as a Swedish citizen. So, I mean, we talk about it a lot, but hearing from students and alumni about your experience is, I mean, it's super rewarding for me as a citizen. For students considering studying in Sweden, those people that are interested but they haven't taken that leap yet, do you have any advice that you would give them based on your own experience?
My first advice is to do it. Right? It's because, like you said, we're always surrounded in a bubble in our own countries, in our own societies. No matter how much we do, I think we always are exposed to a single thought and a single thought environment. I think it's really important to diversify where you're getting your thoughts, what perspectives are you having towards the world. And that being said, that being the ground, that being the base, if you were to experiment with any country in the world or move to any country for studying in the world, I think Sweden should be one of the top choices. because A, education is fantastic. There is no hierarchy among professors and students. That was super nice. B, everyone speaks English, so you won't suffer as much with language. And C, and the most important thing is you get to experience this beautiful state who's there to help you with whatever your needs are. And you will really feel surrounded with infrastructure and development. Besides that, Sweden is also a really beautiful country. I mean, it's expensive. It's expensive to come from a developing country to Sweden and spend over there. But as much as expensive as it is, it encouraged me to take a round trip to Sweden twice because it is that beautiful. So it's a really, really beautiful country too. There are so many lakes and so many activities that you do. I'm a big fan of motorbikes. So one of my winters in Sweden, I went motorbike riding on top of an iced lake, which
Oh,
was crazy for me. But it was so much fun. I never thought this concept that someone could ride motorbikes over a lake, but it was possible in Sweden. So it's really a nice country to be in if you want to experiment on being in a different culture than of your own. It's really receptive.
yeah. And like one thing that I think many people don't think about or know about in Sweden, I mean, yeah, our nature, we have a very diverse nature. We have a long, long country. And
Mhm.
we have this thing in Sweden called allemansrätten. Do you know of it?
Yeah, that you can tent anywhere, that you can camp
Yeah,
anywhere.
the freedom to roam, pretty much. I
Yes,
think it's
yes, yes. I've
basically.
used that a lot.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful concept as well.
Yeah.
So you can, all of our parks are for the people to use. So you
Yeah.
can pitch your tent anywhere and sleep for the night. Of course, there are some rules. You cannot stay forever, but if you want to experience the nature, it's entirely free. So
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to do that if you come to Sweden.
Yeah.
And on the note of English as well, yeah, I mean, the English proficiency is great in Sweden because we start learning English like in second grade, I think, if I
Mm.
remember right. So everyone can speak pretty much. Maybe if you go to some rural, small villages, maybe the older people are not as used to speaking, but I mean, there's always someone that you can take help from. And I had one other thought, yeah, about the master's program as well. I mean, we have over 1,000 master programs in Sweden that are taught entirely in English.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't really need the language to come here and study because everyone can
Yeah.
speak English, and the programs are taught in English as well.
Yeah.
And one more thing, yeah, the education being free. I think there's not a lot of people that knows about this. But if you live in the EU or EEA or
Mhm.
ES maybe, um, then it's entirely free for you as
Yeah.
well to come to study in Sweden. You don't have to pay the tuition fee at all.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that is not very known at all. If
Yeah.
you're outside of the EU, then you will have to pay the tuition fee. But yeah, that's how it is.
But
I don't I don't know the rules.
to add to that a little bit, I think even if you're outside of the EU and the scholarship countries, there are so many mechanisms that could fund your studies. For example, I didn't have to pay for my tuition fees because of the Swedish Institute Scholarship.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of friends who, because of the university scholarships, they didn't have to pay the tuition fees, they just had to pay their living expense. And otherwise the education was completely free for them as well. So I think if you're really considering, this is to all the students who are considering coming to Sweden, if you're really considering, you should, like, with a little bit of extra effort to write that motivation letter or to write that scholarship application, with a little bit of extra effort, I think you really could tap into wonderful resources that the Swedish government or the Swedish universities are providing you, and you could really study a global quality master's for free. And that's really, really something that you could appreciate about Sweden.
yeah. There's a lot of scholarships available. You can find some at our website, of course. Study in Sweden. We have you can easily browse to scholarships. You can also search for the Global Leader Scholarship. What's it called? I'm losing my words. The SI Scholarship.
Yeah, the Citizenship Scholarship for Global Professionals, I think.
Global Professionals. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. You can find that at si.se or just Google Global Professional Scholarship, SI. And there's a lot of, as you said, the universities also have their own scholarships, and there's lots of ways. So by just scouring the internet for a little bit, maybe you can find something that suits just you, and you can come here to study as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that covers it for my questions for you today. But we have some people in the chat. So thank you so much for this talk, Raj. Let's open up for some questions from the chat. So if you're watching this and you have any questions for Raj, please type them in the chat and we will try our best to answer them. And Raj, if you see any questions that you want to take a jab at, please go ahead and take it.
Sure.
So let's see if we have some questions in the chat. I see 6. You can see hello from Ghana. Hey everyone, I'm from Ethiopia, from America. Let's see if we can get some questions coming in. Oh, is that, I can see Audrey Savage in the chat earlier.
She was my boss at Lund University. I'm so happy to see her comment. I think she shaped my life so much. Her confidence and her welcoming nature was so nice for me. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Beautiful. Let's see. Okay. Is it true that PhD is free for anyone, no matter where they are from? I can take this one. So a PhD in Sweden is quite different from elsewhere. In Sweden, you are not when you do a PhD in Sweden, you are considered a colleague. I mean, a worker. You get a pay. You get a salary when you do a PhD in Sweden. So PhD are jobs, pretty much. So you can apply for all of the other programs and courses in Sweden by going to universityadmissions.se. But for PhDs, then you have to go to the university specific website, and all the PhD listings are listed as job listings. So it's quite different from many other places, I know. Is that something you've been thinking of doing, Raj, a PhD?
Actually, I am enrolled right now in a PhD program in Norway, but I'm doing a cross PhD between a university in Norway, a university KU Leuven in Belgium, and London School of Economics in the UK. So these 3 universities. But I'm trying my best to get Lund University as one of the universities as well. So I have not started the PhD yet. It's still a few months before I start. But yes, like you say, a PhD in
it seems
with a full-time.
I think your screen froze for a second there.
Okay, is it back?
You're back.
Am I back?
Yeah,
okay.
You're back.
Yeah, so PhD is such a wonderful thing to do, especially in Sweden, because you get a full-time salary, it's like a full-time job. You also have so much flexibility around what you want to do your research on. So I think as a PhD candidate, soon to be PhD candidate myself, I've considered PhD in outside of Europe and in Europe and in countries like Sweden. Like I've compared many different PhDs, and PhD in Sweden stands out always, because when you're a PhD student, it's over everything else, it's your research that matters the most. And in Sweden, wait, did I freeze again?
No, okay. I think you're fine.
Okay, so I think in PhDs, it's your research that matters the most, and in Sweden, you're actually paid a full-time salary to do your research. So I think PhD is like super good in Sweden. So if you're considering it, go for it.
Yeah, yeah. We got a question from Madeline the Spy. Were you ever considering searching for work in Sweden?
Good question. I personally was sure that I wanted to go back to Nepal after I finished my studies because I still had some engagements. But I know a lot of friends in Sweden during my time who stayed in Sweden and got a job in Sweden. It's slightly true that having a Swedish language um, before you graduate or during your graduate, at least basic Swedish language skills would set you off in an entirely different league when you're looking for jobs. I'm not saying that it's compulsory because I know a lot of international students, like Audrey, for example, who was my boss. He was from the United States. And Swedish was not her native language, but she still had a full-time job even before she graduated. So I know a lot of successful candidates, master candidates, who already had jobs before or during or after their graduation. And like speaking from my volunteering experiences, though, I could stress it again that network is the number one thing that could get you into jobs. So if there are job fairs that university in Sweden regularly organizes, you should go to those job fairs and you should network with companies. You should start writing LinkedIn posts. I think all universities in Sweden have a careers department where they teach you how to update your LinkedIn, how to write your CV, how to reach out to professionals. And I think, at least in my university, they had a really good career department and support system by which I could be linked to the job market. I also know a few friends who did their masters and enrolled as a researcher into the university, and 2 years down the line got the PhD. I have a friend who's doing a PhD in Lund right now. So that's also an excellent career. If you're an academic and are considering to pursue your academic career in Sweden, it's also very, very good.
Cool. We got Madeline asking again, are there any PhDs that don't require endless long form writing? Do you know?
Well, if you're into PhDs, I think you cannot avoid it, right? At some point. For my PhD, I have to publish 3 papers. And I think, yeah, I mean, if as a PhD is about research. It's a research degree. And if you research on something, I think it's sort of inevitable that you communicate that research to the academicians through some sort of writing. So I think this is more a question to your professors. If you select a good professor and if they're okay with it, it's another story. But I think most PhDs would want you to do some forms of writing.
Super. We got Siddhartha from Nepal as well. They are doing a bachelor, almost finished. How and where do I start the visa process once I get admission to a university? So this, I think, this is regarding the residence permit, right?
Yes, I think this is something. Since I'm from Nepal, I share some stories with Siddhartha. I can
Yeah.
give you some hints, not entirely. I did
Yeah.
my process 5 years ago, so I don't remember everything, but I can connect you with people. But I think there are 2 things unique about Nepal and coming to Sweden. First is when you come to Sweden, you come on a residence permit and not on a visa. This was something that confused me a lot as well, because every country I traveled to before, I always went on a visa. But in Sweden, you get a residence permit directly. So you don't even have to apply for a visa. It's all residence permit.
Yeah.
The second thing is, because we don't have an embassy in Nepal, we have to, once our documents get processed and they're approved, we have to go to India, ideally Delhi, for our biometrics. So we have to do the travel, and I think the process only takes about 30 minutes, but it's a painful process of going there and submitting your biometrics, your fingerprints and eye scan and everything. But then you don't have to go back again to take your card. They will mail the card to the consulate in Nepal, which is in Kathmandu. So you just have to go to Delhi once. So yeah, these are some unique things that you might want to be mindful about when you apply.
Super. That's very helpful. And the government agency for getting a residence permit in Sweden is Migrationsverket. You can probably find it quite easily by browsing the internet. Okay, so Connor Friel is asking, I've been looking at some programs at Lund University. Are there many opportunities to work in Lund while a student at the university? I'd like to earn while I study to help with the costs of living.
I have to be very honest. Yes, there are opportunities. Like, I was an international student, and I did have a job when I was working in the Sweden, when I was studying at Lund. But you cannot really expect an amount that will completely cover your cost of living or cost of studies if you're also paying a tuition fee. So definitely, if you're looking for something to help with the cost of living, yes, there are plenty of opportunities to work. I worked in the international office, external relations office. There were so many students working at the library, some of the students working at housing and different things. So yes, there are several, because Lund University is quite big, and it needs a lot of resources, and oftentimes they do take their own students as resources. So it's an excellent opportunity. I also know a few students who actually did research work, which is quite different from the works that I mentioned, that they go with their professors and they help out with their research work. One of my friends did that. So if you want to continue working in academia while you're still at Lund, that's also an excellent opportunity. But once again, be mindful that it won't be as much money as you would need to live in Sweden or pay your tuition fees.
Yeah, you shouldn't count on finding one right away as well. It can be quite hard if you live in another city that's maybe not as big university, and you're trying to get a job at a cafe or something of that sort that is not like academic related. It can be quite hard if you don't speak the language. Many jobs have the requirement of having Swedish. I know it's starting to shift now, and more cafes, etc., hire people that only speak English because, well, everyone in Sweden can speak English, but you shouldn't count on it. So yeah. Okay, I think the time is running out. We have some more questions. Maybe we can answer them in the chat afterwards. We have to wrap up right now. So this is all the questions we can get to today. So first of all, if someone would like to reach out to you, Raj, where might they find you? Do you have a LinkedIn or any other means of contact?
Yeah, LinkedIn. My name is just my name. I think if you want to use the short form, you can use Raj Kharel, which is my name, and the number 4. That's my abbreviation for my LinkedIn account. And yeah, LinkedIn is a good platform to connect.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining today, Raj. It was super nice, super interesting talking with you and learning more about your experience in Sweden. Before we close down, I would like to let all of you in the chat know that we will be hosting another alumni live stream next week with Rena. This is on July 4th at 11:30 CEST. And if you're interested in studying in Sweden, we also host online fairs throughout the year with 20 plus of the biggest universities in Sweden, Lund as well. You can join the fair from anywhere. It's online and it's free. And you can check out the universities, you can chat directly with university representatives and ask any and all questions that you may have regarding studying in Sweden. Study in Sweden, the organization where I work, is also present at these fairs, of course, so you can also ask us any and all questions. You can find more information regarding the online fairs at our website studyinSweden.se/online fairs. We have this here so we can see. And at studyinSweden.se, you can also find tons of resources regarding anything you might be curious about for your Sweden journey. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date to all of the various events and news. And yeah, that's it for today. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you again, Raj, and have a great rest of your day. Hej då.
Thank you so much, Frederick, for this opportunity. It has been wonderful to reconnect with Study in Sweden. And to anyone who is looking and considering Sweden, just one advice: do it. I mean, come to Sweden.
That's a super note to end on. Okay, great.
Thank you, Frederick.
Hej
Have a
då.
good evening.